I moved to Savannah to forget them. I moved to start over. My ex-wife Renata married her new man exactly a month after our divorce was finalized. She called him a genius. She called him a real estate mogul. My own daughter Destiny looked me dead in the eye and told me she'd be walking down the aisle with him standing where I should have stood, because she finally had a father figure who understood what real success looked like. They thought I was washed up. They thought I was just an old retired mechanic living off Social Security, with nothing left but a bad knee and a broken heart. They were wrong. At the reception, one guest stood up and said a single sentence that made Renata scream loud enough to stop the band. And later that night, at 1 a.m, my phone rang. But before I tell you how that call went, let me take you back to where it all started falling apart. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 67 years old, and for 38 years I ran my own auto shop on the South Side, fixing everything from delivery trucks to church vans, keeping half this city's engines running when nobody else would touch them for a fair price. If you've ever poured your whole life into people who only saw you as a paycheck, go on and hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new here, and drop the city you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one, family. The parking lot outside the courthouse was baking that afternoon, but I felt a chill straight through my chest. I was standing there holding the keys to my old Buick, the one I'd rebuilt with my own 2 hands after a transmission gave out on me back in '09, when a hand with long acrylic nails snatched those keys right out of my palm. It was Renata. 58 years old, still put together. But there was something ugly underneath the makeup now, something that had been growing for years. She dangled my own keys in my face like she was baiting a dog. "Don't embarrass yourself, Marcus," she said, loud enough for the lawyers walking by to hear. "Judge gave me the car, comes with the house, and 55% of everything else. You don't need a whole vehicle to get to the barber shop." I stood there with my hands hanging empty. It wasn't about the Buick, it was about the disrespect. "Renata," I said, keeping my voice even, "I rebuilt that engine twice. I know every hose under that hood." She laughed. That same grating sound I used to fall asleep next to. "That's what money's for, Marcus. That's what you never understood. You like getting grease under your nails. Terrence doesn't fix cars, he buys the dealership." Terrence. The name sat in my mouth like a rotten tooth. Man she'd been seeing behind my back for the better part of a year before she finally left. She reached into her purse and flicked something at my chest. It bounced off my tie into an oil puddle. A prepaid gas card. $15 on it. "Didn't want you stranded," she said with that smirk. "That'll get you to whatever motel you're crashing in." I bent down, knees popping, and picked the card up out of the oil. After 34 years of marriage, after raising a daughter, after paying for her mother's hospital bills and her sister's wedding and every vacation she ever wanted, I was worth a $15 gas card. As I straightened up, a shadow fell over me. My daughter, Destiny, 33 years old, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too sharp, carrying a box of her mother's things toward the Buick. "Destiny," I said, "maybe we grab dinner tonight. I need to figure out my next move." She didn't look at me. "Can't, Daddy. Terrence is taking us to that new place downtown, the one with the tasting menu. We're celebrating." "Celebrating?" I said, feeling something crack in my chest. "Celebrating your parents' marriage ending?" She finally looked up, and what I saw in her eyes hurt worse than the divorce papers ever could. Pity, mixed with something close to contempt. "Look, Daddy, let's be real. You had a good run. You worked hard, but the world's different now. You can't rent your way to real money. Terrence is teaching me about real estate, about credit leverage, about building generational wealth." She glanced back at her mother, already sitting behind the wheel of my Buick, revving it like she was late for something. "You're a good man, Daddy," Destiny said, twisting the knife slow. "But you're small. Terrence is a powerful man. He can open doors for me you couldn't even find the key to. You should be happy for Mama. She finally got her upgrade." Upgrade. My own daughter called another man an upgrade over the father who taught her to ride a bike down Waters Avenue, who sat up with her every night she had asthma attacks, who worked doubles to put her through 2 years of community college before she dropped out to chase influencer money. The horn honked. "Destiny, let's go," Renata called out. "Don't waste your breath explaining high finance to a mechanic." Destiny gave me a quick nod. Take care of yourself, Daddy. Maybe pick up a hobby. She turned her back and got in the car. Didn't look back once. I watched the Buick pull out of that lot, leaving me standing there with an oily gas card in one hand and a duffel bag in the other. Most men would have cried right there on the curb, but I am not most men. I spent 38 years telling customers the truth about their engines even when they didn't want to hear it, and I wasn't about to start lying to myself now. When something's broken beyond repair, you don't keep pouring money into it. You cut it loose and you build something new. I walked to the bus stop and sat on that hot bench, pulled out my phone, hands steady as ever, and called my financial advisor, a young brother named Curtis, who'd been begging me for 2 years to diversify. Marcus, he said, everything go okay in court? Sell it, I said. All of it. The rental property on Bull Street, the stake in the barbershop chain, the land my granddaddy left me outside Statesboro. Liquidate everything. Today, silence on the line. Marcus, that's a serious move. Market's not exactly friendly right now. I don't care, I said, watching a city bus rumble toward me. Wire it to the account we opened last spring. You going somewhere? Yes, I said, stepping onto the bus, tapping that oily gas card against the reader out of pure spite, even though it wouldn't scan for a fare. I'm going to Savannah first, and then I'm going wherever the ocean tells me to go. What Renata and Destiny didn't know, what they never bothered to ask about in 34 years, was the patent. 15 years back, I designed a diagnostic sensor for commercial fleet engines, something that could catch a failure 2 weeks before it happened. Nobody wanted it back then, too far ahead of its time. But a company out of Atlanta had been quietly licensing pieces of it for the last 3 years, and the checks had been landing in an account Renata never knew existed, because to her, I was just a man with dirt under his nails who fixed things for a living. She never once asked what those hands were capable of building. 6 months. That's how long it takes for silence to start speaking louder than any argument ever could. In Charleston, where I'd rented a little place near the Battery, my life had turned into something quiet and clean. No more demands, no more Renata wanting a new kitchen island, no more Destiny needing bail money for whatever business idea had failed that month. Just the sound of gulls and the smell of salt on the porch every morning with my coffee. My new neighbors thought I was just a retired mechanic drawing a modest pension, walking to the market for shrimp and grits, fixings in my linen shirt. They didn't know the man buying $2 of okra held a patent that was quietly worth more than the house Renata fought so hard to keep. Then my phone rang on the porch table. Destiny's name lit up the screen. I hadn't spoken to her since a single text confirming I'd landed safely, which she never answered. Why call now? I let it ring twice, then answered against my better judgment, because I am a man who gathers facts before he makes a decision. Daddy? Daddy? Is that you? Yes, Destiny. Everything all right? Yeah. Everything's amazing, actually, she said too fast, ice clinking somewhere behind her, voices laughing. We're at the country club. Terrence just bought a round for the whole membership lounge. I said nothing, let the silence stretch. Anyway, Daddy, I'm calling because Mama wanted you to know. It's official. The wedding's in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, I said. The divorce was final 5 months ago. That's fast. It's a whirlwind, Daddy. When you know, you know. Terrence doesn't like waiting around. He makes things happen, not like she caught herself, well, you know. Even 400 miles away, that stung. Not out of jealousy, but because my daughter was so easy to seduce with fool's gold flash. The venue is the Marriott Riverfront Ballroom, Destiny bragged on. 300 guests. Terrence is flying in a chef from Miami. It's going to be the event of the year. Then the phone shifted hands, rustling, and a new voice came on, sharp as broken glass. It was Ashanti, my son-in-law's cousin, who'd attached herself to Destiny's hip like they'd grown up together, though I knew for a fact they'd met 8 months ago at a networking brunch. Marcus, Ashanti said, that syrupy, fake sweet voice. We just wanted to make sure you got the message clear. We're sending an invitation for formality, but you really don't need to come. Excuse me? Let's be real. A flight's expensive for someone on a fixed income. Terrence has invited city council members, a couple of NFL guys, people from the Atlanta business scene. Might be a little awkward for you. We don't want you feeling out of place in your church suit. I looked down at my linen shirt. tailored by a woman 2 blocks from my porch who used to sew for the Gullah Geechee Heritage Festival. But to Ashanti, worth only existed in Logos. So you're calling to uninvite me? I said. We're calling to save you the embarrassment, she corrected, and hung up before I could answer, laughing that nervous laugh right before the line went dead. I sat there a long time with the phone in my lap, replaying it, stripping the insults away to find the real signal underneath. As a mechanic, you learn that noise is usually hiding the actual problem. Why would people this rich go out of their way to keep me from a wedding I had zero interest in attending in the first place? If I was truly this irrelevant, why did I still take up enough space in their heads to warrant an international call? Fear. That was the signal. Destiny's bragging was too loud. Ashanti's rehearsed sweetness was too rehearsed. And then, a thought hit me cold and clean. I remembered a detail buried in the divorce settlement, a small storage unit. Renata never bothered clearing out because she assumed there was nothing of value in it. And I remembered something else, a clause I'd written into the deed of our old house 22 years back, when I put a mechanic's lien on the property after fronting the money for a full rewire and roof job myself, a technicality to protect my investment. I never removed it. If Terrence was leveraging that house for cash, that lien would surface. And they hadn't asked me for a signature, which meant one of two things. Either they didn't know, or somebody had forged it. I stood up from my porch chair. The peaceful retirement, the shrimp and grits, the afternoon naps, they could wait. There was a short in the wiring back home, and it was about to burn down the only thing I still cared about protecting, my daughter's future. I opened the airline app. Ashanti figured I'd be scraping together bus fare. I scrolled past economy, past business class, and booked first class to Savannah for the next morning. Wasn't going back for the cake. I was going back to inspect the wiring because something about this fairy tale felt wired to blow, and I wanted to be holding the breaker switch when it did. Savannah Hilton Head Airport smelled like jet fuel and humidity, the way it always had. I walked through arrivals not as the tired man who'd left 6 months back, but as Marcus Webb, a man who'd spent his mornings walking the Battery and his evenings reading history books on his porch. I'd lost 15 pounds of stress weight. My beard was trimmed clean. I was heading for the taxi stand when a commotion at the VIP pickup caught my ear, a voice I knew better than my own heartbeat. Renata. I ducked behind a pillar, adjusted my sunglasses, needed to see the enemy before she saw me. There she was, surrounded by 3 brand new suitcases, wearing a full-length mink even though it was 75 degrees out, checking her reflection in a compact mirror over and over. Then, the cavalcade arrived. Not one car, a production, 2 black SUVs flanking a gleaming white Rolls-Royce Cullinan. A driver jumped out to open the door, and out stepped Terrence, looking exactly like his social media photos, veneers blinding white, suit that cost more than my first house. There's my queen, he bellowed, arms thrown wide for an audience of nobody in particular. Renata squealed and ran into his arms like a teenager. Destiny hopped out of the SUV behind them, high-fiving the drivers like she was part of a presidential motorcade. Folks walking past stopped to stare, whispering, wondering if he was somebody famous. I stared too, but I wasn't looking at the fur coat or the veneers. I was looking at that Rolls-Royce's rear bumper. 38 years fixing cars for Savannah's rich and Savannah's pretenders teaches you things. I clocked the discreet plate frame, a small stylized crest with the letters CE, Crown Exotics, wasn't a dealership. It was a high-end rental outfit off Abercorn Street that catered to rappers shooting music videos and grooms who needed to look rich for exactly one weekend. I'd replaced their alternator 2 summers back. Real money doesn't rent a car, with the rental company's own frame still on it. Terrence Cole, the real estate mogul supposedly buying up half of coastal Georgia, was picking up his bride in a car that cost $1,200 a day. I noticed the trunk didn't pop clean. The driver had to slam it twice. Hydraulic latch failing. A maintenance issue Crown Exotics hadn't gotten around to fixing. Terrence wasn't buying the world. He was renting it by the hour. A rental car isn't a crime by itself, but paired with that frantic call from Destiny telling me to stay away, it was a red flag the size of a billboard. I slid into a cab. "Take me to Coastal Trust Bank on Bay Street," I told the driver. Didn't go to my hotel first. Went straight to the money. Coastal Trust was where I'd banked for 28 years, where I deposited my first paycheck as an apprentice mechanic, where I signed the mortgage for the house Renata now called hers. The security guard, old Reggie, did a double take. "Mr. Webb, that you? You look 10 years younger, man." I asked for the branch manager, Harold Pruitt, a man I'd known since high school football at Beach High. He came around his desk to hug me, told me I looked like I'd bought the sun. I sat down and got straight to it. Told him I needed to see my file and ask about the property. His smile faded fast. "I assume this is about the recent activity," he said quietly, turning his monitor toward me. "Your name's off the title, but you're still attached to the lien history, so the system flags me. Marcus, 3 weeks ago, Renata refinanced the house, pulled out 75% of the appraised value. That's $480,000 cash." The room went dead quiet except for the server hum in the corner. $480,000. "Why would she need that kind of liquidity?" I asked. "She's got half my savings, the alimony." Harold glanced at the door. "She came in with him, Marcus. Terrence did all the talking. Told the loan officer he needed bridge capital for a can't-miss opportunity, some land deal near the port expansion. Said he was letting Renata in on the ground floor because he loved her. Said he'd triple it in 90 days. Cold knot tightened in my gut. Wasn't anger. It was the sick feeling of watching a building come down in slow motion after somebody pulled out the load-bearing wall. He's supposedly worth 8 figures, Harold. Why does a man like that need his fiancée's house money? "Exactly," Harold whispered. "We ran a soft check. Man's a ghost. Has credit cards, sure. Has an LLC out of Delaware, but doesn't bank with anybody local. His money's all liquid, moving constantly." "Does Destiny know?" Harold shook his head. "She co-signed as a witness. Was talking about a Cadillac Escalade with her share of the profits." I stood up, hands trembling, not from fear but from the sheer weight of the foolishness I was witnessing. They'd called me a failure. They'd called me cheap. And all the while they were handing the keys of the kingdom to a man who didn't even own his own car. "I'm not going to stop it, Harold," I said at the door. "I'm just going to make sure that when the lights go out, I'm the only one holding a flashlight." The rehearsal dinner was at a restaurant on River Street with candlelight and no prices on the menu. I walked in and told the host I was with the Cole party. He led me to a private room in the back where they were already seated. Renata in a sequin dress too young for her 60 years, Destiny nervous over a cocktail, Ashanti scrolling her phone, ignoring everybody. And Terrence at the head of the table, arms spread along the booth like he owned the room. "Marcus," he said, standing halfway without offering a hand. "Didn't think you'd actually make it. Figured the flight might be a lot for a man your age." "I survived 38 Savannah summers under car hoods with no AC," I said, pulling out the empty chair across from him. "A first-class flight isn't exactly a hardship." Ashanti looked up from her phone, eyes raking over my linen suit. "Is that what you're wearing to the wedding, Marcus? Little casual for black tie, don't you think? We really wanted this classy." "Custom made," I said softly. "In the Low Country, we prefer fit over flash." She rolled her eyes. Renata put a manicured hand on Terrence's arm, marking her territory. "Don't be mean, Ashanti. Marcus does the best with what he has." Terrence ordered a bottle of wine without checking the list, some vintage he pronounced wrong, and had the sommelier pour me a taste like he was doing me a favor. "Probably drink box wine, right?" He said. "This'll educate your palate. $2,000 bottle." I swirled it, held it to the candlelight. Color was off, browning at the edges for what he claimed was the vintage. I took a sniff. Corked. Smelled like wet cardboard. "Distinct," I said. "Suits you perfectly, Terrence." He didn't catch it, clapped his hands, poured it for the whole table. "Celebrating what?" I asked. "The future, Marcus. My future. Our future. I just closed a round for my development firm. Destiny's going to be my VP of acquisitions." I looked at my daughter. "You're leaving your job at the county office? That's a pension job." "Daddy, stop living in the past," Destiny said, eyes defiant but hands shaking. "Terrence is giving me equity. When the port project breaks ground, I'll be worth millions." "And your salary until then?" She hesitated. "We're keeping it lean to maximize growth. But Terrence is covering our expenses. Renata nodded vigorously. He's so generous, Marcus. Paid off Destiny's car note last week. Did you see the receipt? I asked her. Or did he just tell you he did it? Marcus, why do you always have to be negative? Why can't you be happy our daughter finally has a father figure who knows how to win? Destiny cleared her throat, reached into her clutch, pulled out a small velvet box she didn't open. Actually, Daddy, there's something. Usually the father walks the bride. But what? I said quietly. But Terrence made this whole wedding possible. He paid for the venue, the honeymoon. He's been more of a father to me in 8 months than, she stopped herself, then finished it anyway, than you were in years. You taught me to save pennies. He taught me to make millions. She looked at Terrence for approval. So I asked him to give me away. And where do I stand? I asked. Ashanti smiled cruelly. You're a guest, Marcus. Table near the back, next to Uncle Otis. You know, the one who falls asleep. Didn't want to pressure you into a toast. We know you're not much of a speaker. I looked around the table at all 4 of them. My ex-wife, who sold 34 years of memory for a rental Rolls, my daughter's cousin-in-law, who measured worth in follower counts, my only child trading her dignity for stock in a company that didn't exist, and Terrence, conductor of the whole train wreck, drinking spoiled wine and calling it nectar. I stood, buttoned my jacket. I understand, I said. Then I lifted my water glass. To the bride, I said, looking at Destiny, may your equity be as real as your loyalty. I turned to Terrence. And to the new patriarch, I hope your wallet's as thick as your mouth, because carrying this family is heavier than it looks. His smile flickered. What's that supposed to mean? Enjoy dinner, I said, and walked out. I lingered at the coat check, watching through the glass as the waiter brought the bill. Terrence tossed down a black card without checking the total. The waiter swiped it, frowned, swiped again, walked to the phone by the register, came back without the folder. Terrence's neck flushed red, pulled out a second card. Same result. That was all I needed. The first crack in the dam. The following night was the bachelor party aboard a chartered boat off Tybee Island, and from a high-top table in the shadows, I watched Terrence work a crowd of men hungry for easy money, pitching something called harbor coin, backed by port expansion rights he claimed to have locked up exclusively. A local barbershop owner offered $50,000. Terrence waved it off, said the real tier started at $200. Destiny, 3 drinks in, blurted, I'll do $200. My heart stopped. $200,000, money straight out of that house refinance. Then the cabin doors opened, and Renata stepped out in a silver gown, and around her neck, a waterfall of stones catching the deck lights in a chaotic disco ball flash, throwing off reds and greens where a real diamond only ever throws gray and white fire. Moissanite, or cheap lead glass. Physical, provable proof the whole thing was a lie. I stepped closer, said something about the necklace, reminding me of pieces sold on the boardwalk. Terrence's smile froze for half a second. He knew that I knew. I pulled out my phone and texted an old buddy from the neighborhood, a man named Otis Freeman, who worked fraud investigations for a regional insurer with a database sharper than most law enforcement. Sent him a photo. Got a reply within the hour. Give me 24 hours, and if he's who I think he is, stay clear of the blast radius. The wedding day arrived at the Marriott riverfront, 300 guests under a canopy of white orchids, a string quartet, everything designed to whisper, look how far we've risen. I was seated at table 40, dead last, beside the swinging kitchen doors, between a deaf great uncle and 2 empty chairs nobody wanted. I calculated the cost of the whole affair in my head, easily $250,000, and half the money Renata pulled from the house already burned in a single afternoon. Standing at the altar, Terrence was sweating clean through his white tuxedo jacket, sliding his phone in and out of his pocket every 30 seconds, checking for something. I read his lips as he leaned in to kiss Renata after the vows. He didn't say, I love you. He said, did the wire clear? At table 1, a large man in tinted glasses and a black suit sat perfectly still, not clapping, watching Terrence the way a warden watches a prisoner on good behavior. When the ceremony ended, I found him at the bar ordering soda water with lime. Nice ceremony, I said. If you like theater, he answered, voice like gravel. I'm a fan of arithmetic, and the math here doesn't add up. We talked. He told me Terrence had borrowed heavily from his organization, using the wedding as a fundraising event, promising repayment the moment the joint accounts merged. I'm the collection agency, he said, finishing his drink in one pull. Congratulations on your escape. Might want to step back when they cut the cake. Dinner service ended, plates cleared, lights dimmed for the toasts. Destiny stood, tapped the microphone, thanked everyone for coming to celebrate not just a wedding but an awakening. Said growing up she'd been taught money was scarce, that dreaming big was dangerous, that her father fixed things but never built anything new. She waved a vague hand toward the back of the room without pointing at me. Then Terrence stepped up, arm around her shoulder like a proud father, and she called him exactly that. Live in front of 300 people, and raised her glass. She got halfway through to the Cole legacy when a loud pop cracked through the ballroom, feedback screeching through the speakers, and then total darkness. Backup generators kicked on 10 seconds too late for it to be an accident. Harsh blue emergency lights snapped up, exposing every bit of sweat and cheap foundation in the room. The hotel's event manager walked straight to the head table holding a payment terminal, announced over the hot mic that the 3 cards on file for the second catering installment had all failed, one flagged as reported stolen out of Baton Rouge, one declined for insufficient funds with a balance of $9. 300 people stopped breathing at once. Terrence turned to Renata, demanded her card, said his Zurich bankers were on lunch. Renata stood up, pale, and screamed that she didn't have anything left, that she'd wired everything, the house, money, her retirement, into his liquidity pool that morning because he swore he'd triple it before the reception ended. Destiny stood, knocked her chair over. You told me it was instant, she shouted at Terrence. You had me sign the education trust an hour ago. I sat back and took a sip of water, satisfied, because that trust document she'd handed him was worthless. I'd added a line the night before when Destiny showed up at my hotel room threatening to have me declared incompetent if I didn't release the funds, a restrictive covenant locking the principal until a grandchild who didn't exist yet turned 18. Terrence had stolen a piece of paper. Nothing more. The man in the black suit stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the head table with the same slow authority he'd shown at the bar. He pulled out a thick envelope, told the room his name was Detective Aaron Voss, private investigator on retainer to a woman in Baton Rouge named Marisol Cole, married to this man 14 years, mother of his 2 children, whose life savings he'd emptied before disappearing to find a new mark. Photos spilled onto the table. Terrence in Tampa selling timeshares to retirees. Terrence in Charlotte running a fake veterans charity. Terrence meeting a loan shark 2 weeks earlier in a parking garage. Renata collapsed into her chair. Destiny picked up a photo of Terrence in a fast food uniform from 2 years back and whispered, "You were a fry cook?" Terrence snatched it away, muttered something about franchise research, then bolted, jumping off the stage, sprinting for the side exit, finding it locked, turning to find 4 uniformed officers walking through the main doors. "Checkmate, Terrence," I said, raising my glass, and the officers took him down onto a table of half-eaten salmon, cuffing him while he screamed about diplomatic immunity. Renata scrambled toward him, screaming not about betrayal but about her money, clawing at his lapels, and he shoved her back into the wreckage of the wedding cake and told her the money was gone, that he'd bet it all on an offshore sportsbook and lost. Destiny stepped in front of the officers trying to block them, shouting that Terrence was a legitimate businessman, that this was sabotage. The lead officer shoved her aside, told her she was 1 word away from being charged as an accomplice for signing loan documents as a guarantor. She sat on the floor and finally understood she wasn't a vice president of anything. She was a mark, same as her mother. I walked toward the wreckage, past the ruined orchids and the shattered cake, and knelt beside Destiny for a second. She looked up, eyes wet, said, "Daddy, I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," I told her. "That's the difference." Then I walked out into the Savannah night, back to my hotel, and I slept better than I had in years. At 1:14 in the morning, my phone rang. Destiny's name on the screen. I answered, said nothing, waited. Her voice came through broken and small. Said the hotel had thrown them out, that the room had crime scene tape on the door, that the police had taken Destiny's passport because she'd co-signed loan documents, that Renata was outside somewhere in the cold, in her ruined dress, with nowhere to go. She begged me to fix it, said she'd heard me mention money in the ballroom, said the patent must be worth a fortune, asked me to pay off the hotel and hire lawyers, and let them all come stay with me. I let her talk for 6 minutes. Then I told her the person she needed to call wasn't me. It was the public defender's office in Chatham County. She went silent, said those were for poor people. I said, I know, and I hung up. The next morning, I was 10 minutes from my shuttle to the airport when Destiny and Ashanti caught me near the lobby, looking like shipwreck survivors. Destiny in yesterday's dress and hotel slippers, Ashanti scrubbed clean of makeup for the first time I'd ever seen. Ashanti grabbed my arm, begged me not to leave, said Terrence had brainwashed them, and then, placing a hand dramatically on her stomach, announced she was pregnant, 6 weeks along, and that they needed me to buy back the house before the bank auctioned it so the baby could grow up in a real home. I looked at her flat stomach, thought about the 4 glasses of champagne I'd watched her drink at the rehearsal dinner 2 nights earlier, and told her the math simply didn't work, that the house was underwater from the refinance and buying it back meant inheriting 6 figures of debt for a property worth less than the loan against it. Destiny called me cruel, said I was hoarding millions while my family suffered. I told her I wasn't hoarding anything. I was protecting it from people who thought tears were currency. As I turned to board the shuttle, Destiny shouted after me that I was bluffing, that a retired mechanic on a pension didn't have real money, that I was just enjoying watching them beg. I stopped, turned back, and asked the driver to hold one moment. I reached into my coat and pulled out a business card, handed it to her. She read the name of an Atlanta-based fleet technology firm out loud, confused, until I told her to flip it over. On the back, a wire confirmation number dated 2 days earlier. That patent I designed 15 years ago, I said, the one your mother never once asked me about because she thought grease under my nails meant I had nothing worth knowing, got picked up for full commercial licensing across the Southeast this week. Final number? Cash. No stock, no crypto, no promises. $6.2 million. Deposited 2 days ago, entirely post-divorce income. Your mother's lawyers were thorough. They took the house, the car, the savings. Nobody thought to ask about intellectual property that hadn't been monetized yet. Renata, who'd come through the revolving doors just in time to hear the number, said my name once, softly, and then her eyes rolled back and she hit the marble floor. Destiny screamed for help, said her mother was having a heart attack, begged me to pay for the ambulance since they had no insurance. I looked at all of it, the woman I used to love unconscious on a lobby floor, my daughter looking at me now, not as her father but as a walking account balance, and I felt no triumph. Just a ledger finally balanced. I boarded the shuttle. Destiny ran alongside it, pounding on the glass, and I told the driver to open the door one more time. She crawled up the steps, grabbed my hand, apologized, said she was sorry, said she'd learned her lesson, said she could help me manage the $6.2 million since she'd learned so much from Terrence about business. I pulled my hand back. Even at rock bottom, still trying to negotiate a position, I reached into my coat and handed her an envelope. She tore it open, expecting a check. Inside was a single printed page and a bus ticket, a list of temp staffing agencies in Macon specializing in warehouse and logistics work, no resume required, and a one-way Greyhound ticket, leaving in 2 hours. You want me to be a laborer? She said, horrified. You were a vice president of a hallucination, I told her. This is real work, for real people, and it'll teach you something Terrence never could. If you're really the businesswoman you claim to be, Macon shouldn't scare you. She tried to shove the envelope back at me, begged for just $100,000, said it was nothing to me now. I told her giving it to her wouldn't save her. It would just feed the next Terrence who came along, because she'd learned to attach herself to whoever held the biggest wallet. First me, then her mother's new husband, and now she wanted to attach to mine. I told the driver to go. Destiny ran alongside the shuttle for a few yards, then fell behind, and I watched her shrink in the side mirror, standing alone on the pavement holding a bus ticket, which might have been the first time in her adult life She was completely, terrifyingly on her own. The flight back to Charleston felt shorter than any flight of my life. I walked into my little house near the Battery, opened the back doors to the porch, and watched the sun go down gold over the marsh grass. I poured a glass of local wine, not the $2,000 bottle with the fake label, just an honest $20 bottle from a vineyard upstate, and it tasted like truth. Weeks later, I got word through Otis that Renata was working the register at a discount store on the same road she used to shop on with my money. That Terrence was looking at 15 years federal on wire fraud charges. That Destiny had taken the bus ticket after all, and was working nights at a distribution center outside Macon, sharing a room with 2 other women, riding a city bus to work, same as I once did. I felt a flicker of sadness for the little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder in the recliner, but I let it pass through me instead of holding on to it, because that girl was gone, and the woman rebuilding herself in Macon was her own responsibility now. I'd installed the safety mechanisms. The maintenance was hers to do. I am Marcus Webb. I'm 67 years old. I lost a family that was never really mine to begin with, and I found a peace that can't be repossessed. Money doesn't buy you dignity, family. But once you lose your dignity, chasing somebody else's fool's gold, you can't ever buy it back at any price. Invest in yourself first. That's the only asset that never depreciates. Thank you for riding with me through this one, family. If you've ever had to let go of people who only saw dollar signs when they looked at you, hit that like button. It means more than you know. Subscribe if this is your first time here. Turn on notifications because I've got a lot more stories where this came from. And tell me in the comments, would you have given Destiny that money? Or did I do right by her? I read every single one. See you in the next one, family.